Good evening. My name is Lauren Sachs, and I would like to welcome you to this next installment of the Northwest Ohio Jewish Book Festival for 2021. As a member of the Festival Planning Committee and a board member of the Jewish Federation of Greater Toledo, it is my honor to have you with us tonight. I'd also like to take a moment to thank all the members of the Festival Committee, and that includes Cindy Bramson, Lindsay Folker, Judy Fox, Helen Grubb, Lois Levison, Andy Richards, Sue Richards, and Judy Weinberg. I'd also like to take a moment to thank the very talented Hallie Freed and the rest of the wonderful Federation programming staff, the Jewish Book Council, and of course, the Jewish Federation and Foundation of Greater Toledo, without whom none of these events would be possible. As I read Jonathan Santlofer's intriguing new novel, The Last Mona Lisa, I felt transported out of our current daily reality of Zoom meetings, COVID-19 case count updates, and far too much time cooped up at home. Having personally visited the Louvre and spent time in Florence, it was a pleasure to be transported back to these centers of art and culture while simultaneously being caught up in the mystery, romance, and plot twists of this compelling novel. It is no wonder that Jonathan Santlofer is capable of achieving this level of escapism and art world conspiracy, as he is a well-known author of both fiction and nonfiction, as well as a visual artist in his own right. It is also unsurprising that this book would have provided me with such entertaining diversion, given that The Last Mona Lisa was featured on the Today Show's Best Books for Fall 2021, People Magazine and Entertainment Weekly Best Books of Summer 2021, Bookmarks and Literary Hub's Best Reviewed Books of August, and received starred reviews in Publishers Weekly and Kirkus. Jonathan is the author of 6 other novels, among them the international bestseller, The Death Artist, and the Nero Award-winning Anatomy of Fear. His memoir, The Widower's Notebook, appeared on over a dozen Best Books of 2018 and was a featured segment on Fresh Air with Terry Gross. Besides his novels, Jonathan has served as the editor of several anthologies and has had his short stories featured in a variety of collections. As a visual artist, his work is held in major private and public collections, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Art Institute of Chicago, and Tokyo's Institute of Contemporary Art. Jonathan is also the recipient of 2 National Endowment for the Arts grants, has been a visiting artist at the American Academy in Rome and the Vermont Studio Center, and serves on the board of Yaddo, the oldest arts community in the US. It is my great pleasure to introduce Jonathan this evening so he can give you a taste of his novel, which takes its jumping off point from the real life theft of the Mona Lisa in 1911 and thrusts you into the complex and immersive art world of today. I also want to remind everyone that as we are listening to Jonathan speak, and this will be more of a casual question and answer format, and I will ask the first question. If you have questions for Jonathan, please submit them to the Q&A module, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. So for our first question to Jonathan this evening, I'd like to ask, Jonathan, why did you choose the real life theft of the Mona Lisa as your jumping off point? Was there something that had always intrigued you about Da Vinci, about the Mona Lisa, or perhaps about the Louvre itself? And I'm going to take myself off, but thank you, Jonathan.
Well, thank you. First of all, Lauren, thank you for that amazing, wonderful introduction. It's really great to be here with the Northwest Ohio Book Festival. So why did I choose that? I think all of those reasons. The Mona Lisa represents so much of a piece of history, and I'll go through a little bit of that with you if you haven't read the book. But I would say, a long time ago, 25 years ago, I found out about the theft of the Mona Lisa from the Louvre, which really happened in 1911. And it kind of just played in the back of my mind. And then I sort of kept thinking about it and eventually wove a novel that would take place in the past and the present. So for those of you who don't know, the Mona Lisa was stolen from the Louvre Museum in 1911. A disgruntled Louvre employee, Vincenzo Perugia, who had been fired, stayed in a closet, hid in a broom closet overnight, came out in the morning knowing it was a day that the museum was closed to visitors, walked into the Salon Carré, took the Mona Lisa off the wall, and he knew how to do that because he had been the carpenter who had installed the bolts to have the painting on the wall. He had also recently made the box and the glass that was covering the Mona Lisa. He took that, went into a hallway, took the frame off, took the glass off, put the panel under his workman's tunic, his Louvre workman's tunic unit, and he walked out of the Louvre Museum. Probably the most amazing part of that story to me is that nobody missed the painting for 2 days. So, I mean, it gives you a lot of insight into the fact that the Mona Lisa became that much more famous after the theft. It was a painting that was known and it's only one of 16 Leonardo oil paintings. So it was already important as a Renaissance painting and one of Leonardo's paintings, but the theft of the Mona Lisa was a media sensation. And in fact, more Parisians came to see the blank space on the wall where the painting had hung than had ever come to see the Mona Lisa, which is, to me, kind of astonishing, you know. I have more about that, but I know that Hallie has a lot of questions for me, and it's a way for me to sort of have this as a conversation for all of you out there about this novel.
Thank you. I love hearing about that. I personally don't know a ton about this, so I'm very intrigued. And I love that you're sipping some wine. Some of our attendees ordered a little goodie bag, and we sent them home some vegetarian charcuterie boxes and some Moscato wine. So I hope that they are sipping and enjoying with us as we're diving into a Parisian night with you. Wondering how you have this amazing background writing crime fiction and teaching about it. Like, why did this story in particular speak to you and make you want to write this amazing novel?
Well, there were so many things, as I said. Well, first of all, I have an art background. I went to art school and I studied to be a painter. I even went to graduate school for painting, much to my father's dismay. And I came out of graduate school and I really pursued being a painter in a very serious way. And I was actually very, very lucky. I met a museum curator from the Whitney who became a friend of mine and put me in a Whitney Museum show. And it kind of changed my life overnight. And the reason I tell you this is just my art background, which drew me to writing this novel and some of my other novels. So very quickly, I was going along as an artist. It was really all I ever wanted to be. I didn't think I was good at anything else, to be completely frank. And it was going okay. And then going back, it's about 25 years ago, I was having a retrospective show where they gathered the best paintings from collectors and museums of the last 10 years, including the 6 newest paintings in my studio, which were wet, which my assistant and I put boxes around. They went to the exhibition, which opened on a Friday, and the building burned down on Saturday. So, you know, I can say that with kind of just like, oh, okay, now, because it's a long time later. It knocked me for a loop, of course. And it made me re-examine and think about, well, why did I want to be a painter, an artist? What was I doing? At the same time, I was invited to the American Academy in Rome as a visual artist, as a painter. And I got there, and because I had just gone through this and lost so much of my work, I really had trouble painting. And what I did was every morning I would go to a museum or I'd go to a site and I would make copies of famous artwork, and I'd come back to my studio and I started a novel. Because I had already been writing nonfiction about art for the art magazines, and this was something I wanted to try. And I started a novel in Rome, and when I got back to New York, this is a long-winded answer, Hallie, I'm sorry, but I'm just kind of giving some background here. When I got back to New York, I read the 150 or so pages I had of this novel, which was about like a 40-ish New York guy painter who had lost all his work in a fire, and he was really depressed. And I read these pages and I just hated the guy. I hated him, you know, I thought he's whiny and privileged. And so I decided in a sort of funny way to kill the character on the page, which I did. and I basically murdered myself. And then I threw the book away. I just totally threw it away. But what I decided was that, oh, this is what I want to do. I want to write some great kind of thriller. And that book then ultimately became my first novel, The Death Artist. And that was a surprise bestseller, the biggest surprise to me. At the same time, when I came back, I had been making these replications of paintings, and I continued to do that. And then art collectors would ask me to make replications of paintings for them, which I've continued to do. I'm sort of a legal art forger in my sort of spare time. So all of these things, you know, my art background, my legal forgeries, my writing about art, all of these things sort of came together, you know, particularly for this novel. And I will admit something, which is I started writing this novel 11 years ago. I didn't write it for 11 years. No, don't look like that. It wasn't 11 years. I wrote it for a while. I put it aside. I took it out and then I put it back. I was trying to figure out how I really wanted to tell this story. And I knew I wanted to mix fact and fiction, the past and the present. And it took me a while to figure out how to do that. And really, I probably worked on the book seriously for a year and a half, you know, or 2 years, let's say, before it came out. But so it has a long sort of history of that. And I'm personally very intrigued with the art world, which I've been part of, artists, you know, the high Renaissance, of course, is super interesting to me. Leonardo, you know, excuse me, is this amazing character. You know, as I said before, he only made 16, and that's if we're counting the newly discovered Salvator Mundi painting, only 16 oil paintings in his life. So though we know him because he was so prolific with his drawings and his circulatory system and his notebooks and all, he was kind of in terms of painting, he was kind of a slacker, you know, but he was this incredibly well-known character in the Renaissance. And I ended up reading 2 biographies, one of them, Walter Isaacson's great biography of Leonardo, which makes you feel like you know the guy, you know, and I love that part of the process of writing, of sort of getting to know a period and a time even more. So probably I answered that a little more than you ever needed to know, but I wanted to give you my sort of art background in coming to this book, you know.
I mean, you're very talented all around, so I'm thoroughly impressed with you.
Yeah, but I can't
Um,
do anything else, you know. It's that.
Oh man. I mean, and you can speak very well. So that's always, I mean, clearly you're a man of multi-talents. So obviously you did a lot of research. Wondering what that research looked like. Did you travel? Did you go? Did you meet any relatives of this past theft? Did you interview experts? Would love to hear all of that background information.
I did lots and lots of research. I love research. And you know, you have to be careful about research. What I mean by that is you have to be careful not to dump it all into your book, because then your reader's going to be very bored. But I love doing it. I did a lot of research in New York, in the New York Public Library. I got to know the librarians and they helped me find stuff that was difficult to find. Of course, you know, as I said, I read these books about Leonardo. Probably my most fun research, of course, was the travel. And I know Paris pretty well. I know Rome because I lived in Rome at the American Academy for a year. And I'd been to Florence, but I kind of felt like I needed to spend time in Florence like my character. And so what I did was I actually rented an apartment in the Piazza di Madonna, which is where my main character, Luke Peroni, by the way, is the great grandson of the thief, Vincent Perugia. Their family has changed their name from Perugia to Peroni. They want nothing to do with the thief. And Luke Peroni goes to Florence. He's been obsessed with his great grandfather his whole life because he's the most exciting relative, you know. And Luke is kind of a bad boy himself who's been in trouble and all kinds of things. But anyhow, he goes to Florence to find this long lost prison diary that his great grandfather has written. And I'll get into that in a minute. But in terms of my travel, I had a full draft of the book. I rented this apartment in the Piazza de Madonna. I have to just say that I thought, I was saying, oh, I need to do this stuff, and I don't know. And then I was hemming and hawing, and my daughter was here, and she said, well, what are you doing next Thursday? I said, what are you talking about? What do you mean? And she just went to, my daughter is a wonderful girl and loves to boss me around, and went immediately to my computer, booked my flights, found the apartment, did everything. And then the next thing I knew, I was there. And I was living in Florence for several weeks with a full draft of my novel. I traced every single one of my characters' routes through Florence, which was amazing to do. Plus, you're saying about meeting people. Well, a friend of mine in New York who was the editor of Art and Auction, and so he knows art people all over the world. And he said, you have to meet my friend Lorenzo Pezzettini, who's a Florentine artist. And so when I got to Florence, I sent a text to Lorenzo, who, like many wonderful Italians, said, oh, what are you doing now? And I met him for a drink. And in our conversation, he said, oh, it's too bad you missed my exhibition at Limerate. And I said, Limerate, isn't that the name of a prison? Because Limerate was the prison where the thief, the guy who stole the Mona Lisa, he tried to rant after 2 years. The painting, he had the painting for 2 years, which I'll tell you about in a minute, but he tried to ransom it to the Uffizi. And of course he was arrested and he went to jail. But this is the prison where he was interned. And so I said to this guy who I hardly knew, I said, listen, you have to get me into the prison. And he said, well, I think it's closed it's been closed for 30 years, except for this tiny little arts organization on the ground floor in one spot. But by the next day, they got me into the prison. And I went into this, I had this young Italian guy, Stefano, was my escort in the prison, which was all locked and scary and stone. And I got to walk through the halls, so I got a real feeling of it. And then I asked him to lock me into a cell, which was amazing. And I used that scene in the book. I actually stayed in the cell for probably, I don't know, let's say a half hour. It felt like a year, but I walked the 6 feet one way and 9 feet the other, and I sat there. There was graffiti on the walls from the 16th century, 19th century. And I looked in a bunch of these cells, but in terms of research, when something like that happens, it's so astonishing, that you don't expect. I did, of course, make lots of appointments. I went to I was in the Medici library. I was in the Laurentian library. I went to the Medici tomb. I had all these behind the scenes appointments, which were phenomenal. And I was very fortunate. But, then there's these unexpected things like meeting this artist who could somehow get me into this prison where my character had been imprisoned 100 years ago. So that was amazing to me, and I will say somebody had in an interview had said, was your research difficult? And all I could think to say was, oh yeah, it was really a hardship to have to live in Florence and go back to Paris, just really terrible. But I have volumes, of course, of written research. Plus, in the book, I use excerpts from real newspaper articles about the theft. And so I did as much research as I could about that. I should also say that in the 2 years, this is a big part of the story too, but in the 2 years that the Mona Lisa was missing, the supposed story, which I elaborated on and created more of, is that forgeries of the Mona Lisa were made. And there were these two characters, a phony marquis from South America, the Marquis de Valfiero, and an art forger, Yves Chaudran. These were real people. Very little is known about them, except that they were probably the masterminds behind Perugia stealing the painting. And I used that idea that Chaudrin, this forger, made 6 forgeries and they sold them as the originals. That was really fun for me because the scenes where I wrote about the art forger, because I do that, I mean, let's call them replications. I don't make forgeries. I could really understand what it was like to slip inside his mind and to what it's like to make a copy, you know, and to be inside another artist's head or skin. So yeah, anyway, the research is great. I know I went in a lot of directions there, Hallie.
No, I love it. Also wondering, like, so obviously you said Luke was was the grandson of the thief. Can't talk. I'm clearly not as talented as you are. I'm wondering about the other characters. Where did you get them from? Are they based off of any people you know, or like what were the basis of these amazing characters in your
Well,
novel?
you know, there are there are 3 main characters. There's 2 stories. So there's a contemporary story, which is the major story that goes through the book, and that's the great grandson. But the great grandson's an invented character. There is no great grandson. So I invented all of the characters in the present. So Luke Perone's invented the sort of mysterious woman he meets, Alexandra. Green is invented. The Interpol agent who is also after the prison diary, John Washington Smith, is invented. The characters in the past story are all real characters. But what I've done is I've sort of created stories for those characters in the past. For example, Vincenzo Perugia, who becomes Vincent. Okay, I have to go back for 1 second. The prison diary is totally fictitious. I made it up. I needed something, when I talked before about how I was going to tell the story, I needed a way to move between the past and the present. And I figured out, so there was this quest. So the great grandson's going back to find this prison diary. And the prison diary is the thing that, so Luke gets to Florence, to the Laurentian library, and he is able to read the diary. He's only able to read it in small sections when he's at the library. He can't take it out. It's in Italian. He speaks Italian, but it's very difficult. And so what happens is the reader reads pieces of this diary. And then what I've done is you sort of move from the diary right into the scenes in the past. So, for example, when he's reading about his great-grandfather and the great-grandfather's wife, Simone, you move into a story about Vincent and Simone. And I have to say, Simone is invented. And I kind of fell in love with these people in the past. And I sort of wanted, you know, I was creating a fictional story for why he actually stole the Mona Lisa, because I wanted something, I don't know, I think I wanted something really romantic. And I ended up really writing this romance in the past between these 2 people. And ultimately, I think it was mirrored by the romance in the present story. So I went back and forth with that. I completely forgot exactly what your question was. Oh, characters. Okay, so inventing, you know, my characters come to life on the page for me. I have ideas about them, but you know, as you write, more happens. You know, your characters take you on that journey. I didn't know all about Luke. I certainly didn't know all about, you know, everybody. What I do know is this, or what I did figure out, is that nobody is representing themselves truthfully. Everybody is misrepresenting themselves. Everybody in the book is kind of lying. And that was a kind of interesting concept to me. So what Luke doesn't know is he's not the only one who needs to find the diary, and that the prison diary holds a secret that people are willing to kill for. You know, art collectors, art thieves, art forgers. So that was, you know, it was kind of like, how do you write a historical novel that's a suspense novel, that is a thriller, that is a romance. You know, all of these things kind of just started happening for this book. It kind of really took me with it in this way that it was very unexpected at times. You know, I will say that when you ask about characters, well, first of all, everybody always asks me if I'm Luke Peroni, and some of my friends say, "Oh, Luke does sound like you." Well, I guess my voice is there, but Luke is, first of all, he's 36 years old. So unless your camera is really bad, you can tell I'm not 36 years old. He's also 6 feet tall. I'm not. Um, he's covered with tattoos, which I'm not. He has a huge tattoo of the Mona Lisa on his back because he's been obsessed with it and his great grandfather. Um, I guess I share certain things with Luke. An artist. He's kind of at the moment in the book an artist that's sort of a bit of a failed artist. He can't quite get his life together. He hasn't been able to have a decent relationship. Um, I liked that he was a troubled character. Not that I was going to make his life all perfect during the course of the book. I don't, but I thought he was somebody who kind of needed to discover things. And in discovering more about his great grandfather and his family, he finds out things about himself. And although he's in the midst of tremendous danger, and he doesn't realize it for a while, and then, I mean, people start dying around him, so he kind of catches on, you know. I mean, it's sort of, when I just said that, I was thinking about how you create suspense in a book or in anything. And I'm a great Hitchcock fan. I always was. And Hitchcock always talked about how if you have two people talking, like let's say, Hallie, you and I are in a cafe and we're just chatting with each other. And we could be talking about nothing. It could be really dull. But what the audience sees is that there's a bomb under the table. And so everything we say becomes magnified because the viewer knows that our lives are in danger. And so when I'm writing, the reader knows more than my characters know. They know my characters are stepping into danger that they don't know about, which is quite fun to write. And, you know, slowly, you know, and you also, I had to, of course, think to myself, well, I don't want Luke to be an idiot. He has to eventually figure out that he's in tremendous danger, and he does. I would say one other thing about characters. The two men in the book, the Interpol inspector and Luke, are at odds with each other. But part of me felt these are two guys with kind of troubled backgrounds. They share something, and they have to eventually work together if they want to be successful. And I don't know, I guess I feel that about the world. You know, we have to empathize with other people and understand them and work with them if we want to survive or be successful. And that was part of that relationship. And then the woman in the book, Alexandra, is a very mysterious character. And she, when the book was sold, my editor, who's a woman, said, you know, there's only one thing I really want you to do. I'd like you to write 2 chapters from the point of view inside Alexandra's head. And my first response was, I can't do that because she's mysterious and I can't reveal certain things. And then I tried, and then I could do it. And what was great about that was I not only could give the reader more about this character, I learned more about the character. It made me go through the entire book and sort of modify or add to things about her character so that she became a much more important character to me, and another character I care about. But as I said, all of these characters are kind of lying. You know, it's kind of fun to write about people who are all sort of being dishonest, you know. So
Absolutely. I mean, everyone lies, right? I love your perspective of when you were told to write in Alexandra's perspective. It reminds me of like tons of art classes that I took. Turn your page around, get a new perspective. Wondering if you still are doing art, if you're just writing, how you decide when you want to do one versus the other, or if you are ever drawing and inspired to write based on draw a painting. And does that ever inspire you to write something new?
Well, I draw almost every day. Um, and I don't participate in the serious art world anymore. I did, I don't. Um, I would say at one point I was an artist, a visual art, a painter who wrote, and now I'm a writer who paints. Um, I, I make replications, as I said, for which I do about 2 a year, and they're really fun and crazy for collectors who ask me to do them. And I make exact replications. There are rules about that, which I have to follow, but I do that. The drawing that I do every day is mainly for myself, or I'll do things like, I mean, if people followed me, if you go look for my stuff, look for me on Facebook or Instagram, you'll see that I do sketches all the time. You know, so let's say, I don't know, a month ago, it was Rita Hayworth's birthday. And so I love Rita Hayworth. So I did a drawing of Rita Hayworth. Or, you know, if somebody I care about in the world dies, I do a drawing of them or a watercolor, and I put it online. So the drawing, most of those things are for me. Do they inspire? You know, I think there is something in creative process that certainly carries over. You know, the difference is that when you're making a drawing or a painting, you can see the whole thing at once. When you're writing a novel, you have to keep it in your head in bits and pieces, and it really can drive you insane because you know, also I think painting and drawing is a lot more fun. You know, you can have music going, you move around, you're not sitting at your computer with your back starting to hurt, and you know, so it's different physical activity, but you know, they're both about making decisions. You know, in a painting, you're taking things out of it, you're painting over things, or you're erasing things in a drawing. And in a book, in a novel, any book really, you're choosing what is going to stay in. I rewrite constantly. You know, I start my day rewriting what I wrote the day before, and it's just the way I do it. You know, and then I'll move, you know, a couple of pages forward. But I tend to go back. I don't. Maybe like my characters, Luke, I am kind of obsessive. I do think if you're going to be an artist, you have to be somewhat obsessive, and writing is a different kind of obsession. I think the two definitely influence each other. I mean, I started copying Leonardo drawings for this book. I started making watercolor sketches, drawings of the Mona Lisa while I was writing the book. Which my publisher auctioned off most of them, which was sort of fun because, yeah, what was I going to do with them? Not that much. But yeah, so, you know, I think my art background taught me not just about art, but it taught me discipline. You know, it taught me to sit down and do something when nobody is making you do it, right? You know?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think to be successful at anything, you have to be fully invested and always thinking and doing more. So I actually just pulled up your Instagram and I was like, your drawings are amazing of the Mona Lisa. I'm watching the video of you.
Funny video, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Maybe I'll try and share it with everyone after. These are really incredible. I know at the beginning you talked about that you do legal forgeries, which is so intriguing.
Yeah.
And there was a huge, I don't know, myth that the current Mona Lisa that is out is not actually the Mona Lisa. Do you think you could tell? How would you know? Tell us a little bit about what a legal forgery is and how you do it.
Well, legal forgery is simply that you're not trying to pass it off as the real thing. You know, it reminds me that, where I'm sitting now, I'm sitting in my loft on the Plant and Flower District in Manhattan on West 28th Street. So the front half of my loft, people always say, like, did you just move in? I have nothing on my walls, but that's because it's about 2,000 square feet. It's a long thing with windows. And the back is my studio, which is filled with art. And so I kind of have that in my life, you know, and so I don't know. But I just finished, which just was installed in somebody's apartment, a 5 foot by 15 feet long mural that's a copy of an American impressionist named Frederick Frieseke. And the original painting was in the Shelbourne Hotel in Atlantic City, which was razed. And this collector wanted a copy. And so I made an exact copy of it. Now, what I say to my collectors is, and they can do whatever, they can say whatever they want. They can lie to their friends if they want to. But I always say, don't try and sell this. Don't put it up for auction because you're going to get caught. I use contemporary paints and materials. I don't, in the book, the forger in the book, I mean, I love these scenes, but he has found panels from, the 15th century. He has bought pigments that he's ground his own pigments from a workshop of a 15th century artist. He has used all of the materials that you would and X-ray was just invented. So he has gotten from a Louvre employee, this doesn't give anything away really, but he's gotten X-rays of the Mona Lisa. So he knows Leonardo's false starts, the pentimento under the painting, and he has painted those into the forgeries. Now, you said before, there are people who believe that during the 2 years the Mona Lisa was missing, when it was returned, that a forgery was returned. I don't know about that. My book suggests it's possible. And I think the Louvre would probably wants to take out a contract on me because, of course, everyone who goes to the Louvre is going to see the Mona Lisa. And I did get to see it close up, not with a lot of people, just by myself, which was quite amazing. But there are rules about how you make replications, so you have to sign it with your name on the back, and somewhere in the front your initials. You have to change something about it, something about the size or the materials you use, but it can look exactly the same, and that's what I do for people. It's very fun for me, and it really made this book, the forgery idea, resonate for me.
That's awesome. How did your Jewish identity play a role in forming this book? Do you have any Jewish ties to the characters or anything like that?
That's an interesting question because, I grew up in, my father's family was an Orthodox Jewish family. My father was not, but he and like 6 other men created the first temple in Jericho, Long Island, where I grew up. We were from the city and we moved there. And I would say, specifically with this book, it's hard to say that, but I would say that, growing up as a Jew and having that as part of my identity, there were many different, God, I'm thinking about so many things. My parents moved out there, and myself, my sister, and Debbie Schneider were the only Jews in our school. And it was really wild, I mean, it was not fun. And that was a really rough thing. And that's something else. But I think that my parents also, they instilled that, I think it's maybe a stereotype, but they instilled, education and reading. And, my mother, who was one of the most extraordinary people in the world, knew I, was interested in art because I could draw from an early age. And she was, put me in college art classes after school and in the summer when I was 14 and 15. So that, I think they just instilled it. And they also, when we talked about before, the idea of honesty, and, this book is all about dishonesty, which is, and I'm very interested in honesty and dishonesty, and I would say that my parents were extraordinarily honest and very hardworking people. This particular book does not, I mean, I think if people want to know about my more Jewish identity, they should read The Widower's Notebook, which is my memoir, which I will say is a grief memoir. My wife died very suddenly and unexpectedly 8 years ago, and it was a huge tragedy in my life. And I ultimately ended up taking the notes I had been writing for a long time, and it became a book, and it was actually a very successful book. The thing I love most is about that book is that people write to me all the time and how much it helped them, which I mean, that's amazing to me. Also, people tell me that not only is the book, of course, sad, but that it's very, very funny, because I think that, I think tragedy, comedy, sadness, and comedy are very close together. The absurdity of life, and but that would be the book, I guess. That's it's a nonfiction book. It's a true story. So I don't know. Yeah.
No, I think that's a great answer. I just want to remind everyone, if you have a question, to drop it in the Q&A module at the bottom of your screen. I'm going to start asking a couple of those to you, Jonathan. Let's see. Oh, here's a good one. So I'm sure you know who the Monument Men are. And the question's wondering about the Mona Lisa and if they helped to keep it safe during World War II.
Well, the Mona Lisa, yeah, they took it out of the Louvre. They hid it, along with many other paintings. Yeah, the Mona Lisa was hidden. It has this extraordinary history. It probably would have been stolen or destroyed, very possibly. The Mona Lisa was, Leonardo took on. I'm sorry, I'm going a little left of this question because it's interesting. So Leonardo took on a commission from a silk merchant, and paint. It was a portrait of his third wife, Lisa Giardini, and he needed the money, and then he didn't need the money. He became very successful quite soon after, and he never gave them the painting. I don't know what happened to the money they gave him or what happened, but he kept the painting with him for the rest of his life. And he was living in France. King Francis I was his mentor. And when he died, the Mona Lisa went into the French courts. And then Napoleon came to power. And Napoleon took the Mona Lisa and put it on his bedroom wall. So the Mona Lisa has some stories to tell. And then it went to the Louvre and it was stolen. So, this painting has so much history, right? This Renaissance and Napoleon. And yes, it was absolutely hidden during the war. Absolutely.
I love that. I always wondered why she was so famous and important, but who knew she was on Napoleon's wall?
Things become, of course, because they're rare and we associate a lot of things, they become iconic. And they take on much more value and importance because they're tied to history or they're tied to somebody else. And, this is a painting that's tied to Leonardo, it's tied to the Renaissance, it's tied to the war, it's tied to an idea about a certain kind of female beauty at a certain time in history. It's just got so much, and it's a small painting for those of you who've never seen it. It's quite a small painting. And of course, it's difficult to see nowadays because you have to go in a room with many other people and it's far away and it's under glass. And when I got to see it, I suggested to the curator that they allowed everybody in to see it for a minute by themselves. He thought that was an insane idea, of course. I also said I thought I should be allowed to keep it overnight. And he didn't laugh, but my French is not very good, so maybe I didn't tell it well. I don't know. So.
That's cute. So somebody else was asking, have the forgeries made of the Mona Lisa been found, and have they been compared to the actual one?
Yes, most of them have been found. In fact, just a few weeks ago, very recently, one of the copies of the Mona Lisa that's believed to have been made by Leonardo's assistant, surfaced and is coming up for auction. So some of the, there is a copy of the Mona Lisa in the Prado. A lot of them are in museums. There are a few that are believed to still be missing. The one that is coming up for auction they say they're attributing to his assistant looks very, very much like Leonardo's Mona Lisa. I mean, I'm sure next to each other you would be able to tell the difference, but it does look a lot like the actual painting. The others, you know, they have the same sitting and the same kind of pose and background, but you can see they're quite different. And in terms of the others that are missing, I don't know. I mean, if somebody finds one, give me a call. You know, let's make a lot of money. So.
Oh, that's awesome. So another question is, first there's a comment. So most artists that write books usually do children and young adult books as a venue for their art, such as Chris Van Allsburg, Neil Gaiman, and other graphic artists. And she asks, are you the rarity that does your art separate from your books? Are you ever thinking about doing something combined?
Well, my novel, Anatomy of Fear, which is my favorite of my earlier crime novels, is about a police sketch artist who, by the way, his name is Nate Rodriguez, and he's half Jewish and he's half Puerto Rican. Because I wanted, when I was creating him as a character, and but what I want to say is that book is illustrated with his police sketch drawings, and I purposely created a forensic artist so I could make his drawings in the book. But Nate, I decided I wanted to create a character who was, to me, kind of quintessentially New York for when I wrote that book. And it struck me that, you know, New York is such a Jewish and Spanish city that I wanted to pull these two things together. And that was fun for me because I also have a good Puerto Rican friend. And so I got to talk to his abuela, his grandmother, who I swear is just like my Jewish grandmothers, you know, just the same. She was always trying to get me to eat, telling me I was too skinny, you know, the same kind of things. So I illustrated both my Nate Rodriguez books, and I have been working on a graphic novel way too long. You know, what happens, I'm going to do a graphic novel. I mean, it's just almost all drawings, kind of. Yeah, I'm working on it. So I'm not an anomaly. I'm going to do it too. I hope to anyway.
That sounds amazing. We just had an author this past Sunday that came in that had a graphic novel. It was called Whistle. She's a Jewish superhero in the DC world. So she did not do the drawing. She was just a writer. So maybe you can hook up with her and do a little bit of both.
That would, I wrote a story for an anthology. I don't remember when it was. It's a while ago, but it's called Jewish Noir. And I wrote a story in which the young boy, who's based on myself, and his grandfather, who is based on my mother's father, who was my favorite man that ever lived and kind of raised me, in which they evoke the golem in this story. And I did a drawing of it. So if you find the book, Jewish Noir, I love that story. I don't know if it's my best story, but I love that story because it's about my grandfather, who was my favorite person, you know, just about ever. So
That's amazing. I love that. So what are you working on right now?
I'm working on the sequel to The Last Mona Lisa. And it's killing me, Hallie. It's killing me. I just got to say, you know, because the other book, I took my time. And this one I'm writing with a deadline. But I do have I found it's not, doesn't take place in the same places. Luke is in the book, and I'm using the characters, but the story is totally different. But it does another story that goes between the past and the present, which is something I discovered that I love doing because it keeps the reader like jumping from one story to another. And I think it's an exciting way, though it's difficult, it's a way that I grew to love. And I always feel as a writer, it's my job to make it seem easy. You know, I don't want the reader to be, you know, like lost or feel, oh, this is difficult. You know, I no matter how much I've suffered, I don't want the reader to suffer, you know, so.
Well, that's so exciting. I physically love how this book looked. I love how the edges of the pages, they look very antiqued and beautiful. So, do you think
I mean,
you'll Yes. Well,
Yeah.
we have the paperback versions, I should say. We didn't have the hardcover.
Well, the paperback version is beautiful as well.
Yes, yes. So
Uh,
and I loved it. Did you help to design the cover?
no, not at all. And it's funny because normally I hate my covers and they don't want, oh, he's an artist, don't even show it to me. This publisher just, they came up with the cover and I loved it. I don't think I've ever felt quite like that. And they did this interesting thing, which is they made the hardcover, the trade paperback, and the ebook all published on the same day. And the reason was that the big box stores, Target, Sam's Club, Costco, ordered, it's very flattering, they ordered like 60,000 books before it came out. And they only wanted the trade paperback. So of course we did that. I have not listened, by the way, to the audiobook, but people who know audiobook readers, it's read by Eduardo Ballerini, who's a really big time audio reader. And I have been hearing it's becoming really successful. And I've been hearing from many people that it's like a really great audiobook. I will never listen to it because I wrote it, so it would be too weird for me. But just the other night, I was interviewed for the San Miguel Distinguished Writers Series, and the woman who interviewed me said I both read it and listened to it. She said, and the audiobooks are really great. So
Oh,
I
that's
recommend
amazing.
that to people who like listening to books.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing to do, especially if you travel a lot or you drive or any of those things.
Yeah.
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you tonight. I hope that everyone is intrigued to read this book and all of your books. They all sound very interesting. I want to check out the Widow's Memoir and get
Yeah.
into that. Sounds amazing. Um, and I just thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we're so thankful to have this opportunity with you. If anyone wants to get Jonathan's book, we still have some in stock. I also have his beautiful signature that we have on the inside of those books. So you can reach out to me, Hallie at jewishtoledo.org, or go to jewishtoledo.org and look for the book festival logo. We have one event left in this year's 2021 Jewish Book Festival, and it's this Thursday at Congregation at Chaim. We have a couple spots left for lunch, and we'd love for you to join us if you're able to. If not, we also have a Zoom link. So again, you can check us out online, sign up, and we hope to see you next year and at future events from the Jewish Federation and Foundation of Greater Toledo. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. Enjoy a glass of wine and sit back and relax. Thank you.